live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
The increasing number of natural disasters and dangers linked to climate change, highlighted in a major UN report released on Thursday, represents another strong wake-up call to the world, which must be countered by finding sustainable solutions quickly, UN Secretary-General Antonio Gutierrez has said, speaking at the launch of the State of the Global Climate Report by the World Meteorological Organization.
The National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, expects that this year's mild El Nino will not have significant impact on GDP as well as inflation, and thus cost the government less in interventions.
Rappler CEO Maria Ressa posts bail and leaves the Philippine court following a string of criminal charges. Ressa was arrested upon her arrival at the Nino International Airport at 6:30 a.m.
And Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's regime, bolstered by a Russian military deployment infuriating the U.S., announces a ban on Washington-backed self-declared interim leader Juan Guaido holding public office.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. The increasing number of natural disasters and dangers linked to climate change, highlighted in a major UN report released on Thursday, represents another strong wake-up call to the world, which must be countered by finding sustainable solutions quickly, UN Secretary-General Antonio Gutierrez has said. Speaking at the launch of the State of the Global Climate Report by the World Meteorological Organization, Mr. Gutierrez reiterated his call for action. This was why he had convened the Climate Action Summit due to take place on September 23, he said, sitting alongside the President of the General Assembly and the head of the WMO, briefing correspondents in New York. Let's listen in.
It is important that we tackle climate change with much greater ambition. And I am telling leaders, don't come with a speech, come with a plan. I'm calling on them to come to the summit with concrete, realistic plans to put us on a sustainable path once and for all. We are very close to the moment in which it will no longer be possible come to the end of the century with only 1.5 degrees. We have very few years to reverse this trend because the concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere will not disappear. And so we are getting close to the moment in which irreversibly will be much worse than the scenario that was described by the IPCC. A growing number of governments, cities and businesses, it is true, are already understanding that climate solutions can strengthen our economies, improve air quality and public health, and protect our environment. And we expect initiatives in a diversity of sectors, such as energy, sustainable agriculture, forests, oceans, and resilience to climate impacts. And I hope it will also highlight the importance of gender diversity in all decision-making and emphasize the importance of a just transition, where no one is left disadvantaged by the necessary climate action.
The WMO said that the temperature rise last year came despite the agreement by the international community in December 2015 in Paris to curb carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions and to limit global temperature rise to well below 2 degrees Celsius.
One of the key issues here is that the lifetime of carbon dioxide is very long. So the problem doesn't disappear if we would stop emitting carbon to the atmosphere 50 years from now. So we have to find a solution in the coming decades, and if we don't do so, then we will live with the consequences, and it will take thousands of years to return back to the pre-industrial levels of carbon dioxide. And if we go to these higher levels of carbon dioxide, we would also see a major change in the global rainfall patterns. So we would have difficulties in feeding the growing global population. That's, to me, the main concern related to climate change. And the sea level rise would continue at the pace of 1 meter per century. And we have a potential to see sea level rise up to tens of meters if we melt the glaciers of Greenland and Antarctica.
According to the WMO, carbon dioxide levels were at 357 parts per million in 1994, rising to 405.5 ppm in 2017. Professor Talas also described striking evidence of record warming from 2015 to 2018, increasing sea level rise and the loss of sea ice in both the northern and southern polar regions. Noting that extreme weather events have continued into 2019, UN Chief Gutierrez said extreme climate events such as the recent cyclone Idai in Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe are becoming more frequent.
Climate change is happening now and to all of us. Every week brings a new example of climate-related devastation. No country or community is immune. And, as is always the case, the poor and vulnerable are the first to suffer and the worst hit. My heart goes out to the hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people affected by the recent cyclone Idai in Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. Such events are becoming more frequent, more severe, and more widespread, and will become even worse unless we act urgently now. Science says is needed.
The physical science and socio-economic impacts of climate change are accelerating as record greenhouse gas concentrations drive global temperatures towards increasingly dangerous levels, according to a new report from the World Meteorological Organization. The WMO statement on the state of the global climate in 2018, its 25th anniversary edition, highlights a record sea level rise as well as exceptionally high land and ocean temperatures over the past 4 years. This warming trend has lasted since the start of the century and is expected to continue.
In other news now, prominent journalist and Rappler CEO Maria Ressa posted bail and left the Philippine court following a string of criminal charges.
I think one of the things we need to step up and admit is that the press in this country is under attack. What we're going to do about it. We won't take the threat sitting down. We're going to actually believe in the rule of law, even though I've seen in the number of cases filed and the number of arrest warrants that have been issued that the rule of law has been weaponized.
Rappler's Chief Executive Officer Maria Ressa posted bail on Friday, March 29 in her anti-dummy law case. Ressa posted 90,000 pesos bail before Branch 265 of the Pasig Regional Trial Court after she underwent booking procedures at this Pasig police station. The posting of the bail came following Ressa's arrest upon her arrival at the Nino International Airport this morning at 6:30. Ressa had been allowed to attend conferences abroad despite her pending cases. In a statement, Ressa's lawyer Francis Lim said this latest episode of his client's arrest was not surprising and that they are prepared for it. He said, but let it be crystal clear that these acts of harassment will not deter our clients from doing their duty as journalists. Quote, Ressa and her website Rappler have been hit with a string of criminal charges in recent months.
The fact that the government continues to try
the latest charges allege she and colleagues at Rappler violated rules on foreign ownership of media. She was taken into custody after arriving at Manila's airport from a trip abroad. Ressa, 55, and 6 other current and former Rappler associates are accused of allowing foreigners through a 2015 bond sale to take control of the website. Now, this case and most of the 10 previous ones against Rappler spring from the 2015 investment from the US-based Omidyar network, which was established by eBay founder Pierre Omidyar. Under the Constitution, investment in media is reserved for Filipinos or Filipino-controlled entities.
11 and then
Malacanang said Rappler Chief Executive Officer Maria Ressa should stop using press freedom as an excuse to attack the administration of President Duterte for her arrest.
That she's being arrested. All are equal before the law. She wants to be treated differently. That cannot be done. All warrants of arrest issued by competent courts are to be served the way it was served to her this morning. And warrants of arrest are not issued unless the court's judges determine there is a probable cause, which means due process has been observed. So she cannot be complaining that this is again a violation of press freedom. Press freedom has nothing to do with the charges against Ms. Ressa. She's charged of a crime and there is a determination of probable cause. Hence, a warrant of arrest has been issued. She should concentrate on defending herself in court.
2 female police officers served Ressa an arrest warrant upon her arrival at the Nino International Airport for violation of the anti-dummy law in connection with the issuance of Rappler shares to the United States-based lobby group Omidyar Network Fund, which is a violation of the Constitution. Ressa was brought to the Pasig City Police Headquarters for booking procedure at 7:02 a.m. Ressa posted a tweet while she was being transported to the Pasig Regional Trial Court. Aside from Ressa, fellow Rappler officers and members Manuel I. Ayala, Nico Jose Noliedo, Glenda Gloria, James C. Bitanga, Felicia Atienza, and James Velasquez are also facing charges. On Friday noon, Ressa arrived at the sala of Judge Asaray Pacheco of the Pasig City Regional Trial Court Branch 265 and posted the required bail for 90,000 pesos for the case filed by the National Bureau of Investigation Cybercrime Division.
Again, right? Let's not confuse good treatment with the kinds of...
Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Is our most important asset, and it should always be a constant constant effort to seek ways to take care of it. That includes professional medical help.
Welcome back. Desperate workers leaped to their deaths as a huge fire tore through a Dhaka office block on Thursday, killing at least 25 people and trapping others in the latest major inferno to hit the Bangladeshi capital. A day after flames tore through the 22-story FR tower in Dhaka, trapping hundreds of office workers, police said they intended to talk to the owner of the building as part of their inquiry. Some of those stuck inside made it to safety by sliding down cables on the side of the building. But as shocked onlookers watched, others took their chances and they jumped in a bid to escape the smoke and the heat. At least 6 people, including a Sri Lankan national, died this way, according to officials. Senior fire service official Moshin Ali told AFP that rescuers were scouring the building, concentrating on the worst affected 8th to 10th floors. The fire department initially put the death toll at 19, but police said Friday that 6 more had died in the fire. Bangladesh authorities have ordered a probe into the incident to examine claims that the skyscraper lacked fire equipment. Its fire exits were inadequate and it had been illegally extended.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's regime, bolstered by a Russian military deployment, infuriating the U.S. on Thursday, announced a ban on Washington-backed self-declared interim leader Juan Guaido holding public office. But National Assembly Legislature Speaker Guaido immediately shot back that the 15-year prohibition announced on state television by Maduro's Auditor General Elvis Amoroso was invalid. He is not Auditor General. The legitimate Congress is the only one with power to designate an Auditor General, he said.
Decía que me iban a inhabilitar, como si pudieran inhabilitar a todo un pueblo bravo en las calles de Venezuela exigiendo sus derechos.
Juan Guaido will be barred from holding further public office for 15 years, the maximum allowed by law, the state financial controller has announced. Though unpopular in a country spiraling ever deeper into economic chaos, Maduro has the upper hand at home thanks to loyalty from his military chiefs and since last weekend the presence of 100 Russian troops. Abroad, Guaido is buoyed by U.S. sanctions against Maduro's regime, funneling funds his way and efforts to have his envoys recognized over Maduro's in diplomatic missions and international organizations.
A national remembrance service for victims of the New Zealand mosque attacks began in Christchurch Friday with a Mauro lament echoing across the South Island city. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was joined by representatives from 59 other nations, including her Australian counterpart Scott Morrison, at the event, which drew tens of thousands of people. Christchurch Mayor Leon Dalziel said the March 15 rampage by a white supremacist gunman that claimed 50 lives was an attack on us all. The service with the theme "We Are One" was broadcast on national television.
One of the survivors.
I'm sad for the occasion that we have to be here, that Christchurch and New Zealand is coming together for, but I'm also overwhelmed and just happy that New Zealand could come together in such a way that just makes you so proud to be a New Zealander.
It's a very special day and we need to be here in support of our Muslim brothers and sisters and share our love with everybody. That's why we're here.
I've lived in Christchurch most of my life, and have something like this happen here has been terrible for our city and the whole of New Zealand, and just to be here and just remember the tragedy and thinking of the people today that were killed so tragically.
North Korea has almost completed rebuilding a long-range rocket site it had promised to close, Seoul lawmakers told reporters after a closed-door meeting with South Korean intelligence officials. The claim comes a month after a second summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in February ended without an agreement, deepening a gap between the two on how to achieve complete denuclearization. Shortly after the end of the Hanoi summit, a series of satellite images emerged suggesting increased activity at the North Sohae rocket site, triggering international alarm that the nuclear-armed state might be preparing a long-range or space launch. The North began rebuilding the center, which was partly dismantled last July, and before the North U.S. summit in February. Lawmaker Kim Min-ki told reporters after the closed-door briefing by the National Intelligence Service. The work is almost complete, with some maintenance activity being underway, he said. Friday's latest assessment by Seoul could suggest a reversal in policy by Kim, who agreed to shut the Sohae site at a meeting with South Korean President Moon Jae-in in Pyongyang last year. Experts have warned a launch of any kind would send the stuttering talks on denuclearization into disarray.
In other news, U.S. President Donald Trump held his first campaign rally after the release of the Mueller report. He said that, quote, the Russia hoax is finally dead, and also touched on healthcare, illegal immigration, and the case of actor Jussie Smollett. Take a look.
The economy is roaring. The ISIS caliphate is defeated 100%. And after 3 years of lies and smears and slander, the Russia hoax is finally dead. We're going to get rid of Obamacare. And I said it the other day, the Republican Party will become the party of great health care. It's good. It's important. Another 2 caravans now are pouring up. Mexico could stop them so easy. And you know what? If they don't, it's going to cost them a hell of a lot of money, honestly. Because they could do it so easy. So easy. And if they don't, and I'm telling you right now, we will close the damn border.
Meanwhile, President Trump also addressed the Jussie Smollett fiasco at his rally in Michigan, calling the case an embarrassment. Smollett, who's black and gay, claimed in January that 2 masked men jumped him while shouting racist and homophobic slurs. But the case quickly unraveled under police and media scrutiny. Smollett was arrested and hit with a 16-count felony indictment, but the Cook County State's Attorney's Office on Tuesday dropped all charges with no warning and little explanation.
He said he was attacked by MAGA country. Did you ever hear that one? MAGA. Maybe the only time I've ever agreed with the mayor of Chicago. Maybe. That's a terrible situation. That's an embarrassment not only to Chicago, that is an embarrassment to our country.
The 2019 Israeli legislative elections for the 21st Knesset House of Representatives of the State of Israel will be held on the 9th of April. Israeli Ambassador Rafael Harpa said, and I quote, "I am honored to cast my vote today here in Manila for the Israeli legislative elections for the first Knesset. This is the most important political event in the country, which is going to determine the next Prime Minister of the State of Israel. The election process in Israel is based on nationwide proportional representation and takes place once every 4 years. The elections will take place outside of Israel at the Israeli diplomatic missions all over the world, including the Philippines, on March 28, 2019. Ambassador of the State of Israeli in the Philippines, Rafael Harpaz, voted on the 28th of March. After casting his vote, he discussed the essence of the Israeli democracy as well as the bilateral relations between Israel and the Philippines.
And the news continues here on Eagle News International. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, expects that this year's mild El Nino will not have significant impact on the GDP as well as inflation, and thus cost the government less on interventions. In a briefing on Friday, Socio-Economic Planning Secretary Ernesto Pernia told reporters that the impact on GDP will be minimal, considering that the agriculture sector only accounts for about 8 to 9% of the GDP growth. The farm sector is expected to bear the brunt of the impact of the El Nino this year. NEDA said El Nino's impact on commodity prices will also be minimal, considering that the government has already passed the rice trade liberalization law and that majority of rice farmers have already completed their harvests. Pernia said the RTL was passed just in time, or rice tariffication law just in time, if the law was not passed immediately. He said the country would have faced higher inflation given the drought's impact on agricultural lands, many of which still grow rice, the country's staple and a water-loving crop.
Which provides us more sources of affordable rice to meet the rising food demand. Food prices will likewise be under control despite the possibility, especially of domestic supply constraints due to El Nino. Still, we have more work to do to make the agriculture sector resilient from extreme weather events. The industry and service sector.
Initially, NEDA Assistant Secretary for Policy and Planning Carlos Bernardo Abad Santos said the estimate is that the weather phenomenon will cut about 0.2 percentage points off of GDP growth. But this estimate has been factored in on the latest growth target adjustments made by the Development Budget Coordination Committee.
The Philippines is poised to export more agricultural products to Russia as the two countries have agreed to increase the volume of bilateral trade. Agricultural Secretary Manuel Piñol visited here in Russia and Belarus to promote Philippine agricultural products. Our EBC Russia correspondent Emmy Coloma reports from Moscow.
The Philippines is poised to export more agricultural products to Russia as the two countries have agreed to increase the volume of bilateral trade during a recent meeting with the delegates of Russia and Philippines Agricultural Cooperation. Agriculture Secretary Manuel Piñol visited here in Russia and Belarus to promote Philippine agricultural products.
The ambassador has emphasized that this is a 180 million market. And our gateway to this market is Russia. So if we're able to establish our good relations with Russia, we're opening up a totally new market.
The Department of Agriculture urged the possibility of bringing the local Guimaras mangoes, coconut products, and pineapple beets, along with the fisheries products, to the Russian markets.
So, yan, coconut, manga, and then we're coming back in June of this year. We're joining the Belarus Agro Festival, and we'll be bringing a lot of big players: tuna industry, sardines, coconut, our fruits, bananas, pineapple, and all the other products that we will offer this market. We're also joining the September World Food Expo here in Moscow, and the ambassador here was telling me that there's a company here interested in buying our Guimaras mango, and I called up Director Gutierrez of Iloilo today, and I just received feedback from his ambassador. By next week, available 6 metric tons. From Guimaras. The week after that, another 5 metric tons. They are looking at investing in banana farming, or rather pineapple farming, because they've heard that Philippine pineapples are now considered as the best in the world. They are looking at our tuna industry. They would like to order some canned tunas. We are offering them shrimps.
Secretary Manny Piñol is confident that it will be of great help to the Philippine agriculture sector if it opens a new market in Europe. He also presented the banana tuna fishing and fishing boats industries and a search for fertilizer to the agricultural agency in the Russian government. Secretary Piñol wants the agriculture in Mindanao to benefit first during this mission in Russia.
Actually, sabi ko nga, we regret that we did not discover this market for so long. We regret that we have neglected this market for so long. And we appreciate the efforts of Ambassador Ressa to persistently and steadfastly facilitating our endeavors to have access to this market. Siya lang yung naniwala dati wala naniniwala sa kanya. Pero ngayon naniniwala na kami. It's a huge market, no? 180 million. Can you imagine that?
Meanwhile, Russian companies are reportedly keen on exporting grains such as wheat and the improvement of Philippine fishing boats. Russia in the coming years will become one of the leaders of the world agricultural market and one of the biggest grain exporters, shipping over 40 million tons of grains every year to different countries. According to DRRM, Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Operations Center of the Department of Agriculture, the Philippines is losing more than 1 billion pesos because of continuing drought.
We cannot stop El Nino. If people think that I can't do something to lessen the impact of El Nino on the farmers, it's impossible. So, ang unang recommendation ko doon during the water summit, number one, sabi ko, let's face the fact, we are losing some of our headwaters. So my number one recommendation as DA Secretary to address the water problem in the country, which of course will address El Nino also. Number one, we have to identify the headwaters of the country and declare this as protected areas. Not just symbolic declaration. But protected areas which will really be protected by forest rangers, and nobody should touch the headwaters, because if you dredge the major river systems, then you will actually deepen it and enlarge its capacity to hold water. We shouldn't be afraid of El Nino.
He hopes to bring huge investments the Philippines during this series of talks with the Russian and Belarusian governments. From Moscow, Russia, this is Emi Coloma and I'm 1 with 25.
Thank you, Emmy. Meanwhile, Chinese telecom giant Huawei vowed to move forward as it announced that its telecom infrastructure business contracted slightly in 2018 amid a global U.S. campaign to blacklist the company over espionage fears. Take a look.
迎难而上，追求领先，为选择华为的客户和国家赢得优势。运营商业务呢，应该说是在整个运营商投资波动的情况下，实现了销售收入2940亿元人民币，同比略有下降，但是在我们整个管理层的预期范围之内。
Now, he reiterated Huawei's insistence that it poses no security risk and sought to play up the company's trustworthiness. The company's carrier business was down 1.3% on the year compared to growth of 2.5% in 2017 and annual increases typically in excess of 20% in years past. Huawei is the leading manufacturer of equipment for next-generation 5G mobile networks that will bring near instantaneous connectivity for smartphones, but faces pushback in some Western markets over fears Beijing could gain access to critical infrastructure. Huawei also is grappling with the December arrest by Canada of Chief Financial Officer Meng Wanzhou, daughter of company founder Ren Zhengfei, on U.S. charges that she and Huawei circumvented sanctions against Iran. Two affiliates also were charged this year with stealing trade secrets from telecom group T-Mobile in a separate case. Washington has long considered Huawei a potential threat due to the background of founder Ren, a former Chinese army engineer. But Huawei has vowed to never allow security backdoors in its products, which could be used for espionage or sabotage, and insists Washington has never produced evidence substantiating claims of security risks.
U.S. and Chinese negotiators wrap up constructive trade talks in Beijing ahead of another round next week, a top American official said, as the economic superpowers aim to settle a bruising tariffs battle. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin held negotiations with China Vice Premier Liu He at the Diaoyutai State Guest House after a working dinner. Mnuchin wrote on Twitter that he and Lighthizer concluded constructive trade talks in Beijing, but he did not provide more details.
Thank you.
I look forward to welcoming China's Vice Premier Liu He to continue these important discussions in Washington next week, he said. Officials are seeking to iron out major differences over U.S. accusations that China has been using unfair trade practices for years by heavily subsidizing its companies while snatching the technological know-how of American firms. The Chinese Commerce Ministry said a large amount of work remains to be done, and both sides confirmed before this round of talks that another face-to-face negotiation was scheduled for Washington next week.
In other business news, Vietnam's growth slowed in the first quarter of this year, dragged down by a weakened agricultural sector hit by a swine flu outbreak and a sharp drop in exports. The communist country is one of Asia's fastest growing economies, buoyed by exports that have helped GDP growth hit above 6% annually since 2015. But year-on-year growth slowed in the first 3 months of 2019, coming in at 6.79% compared to 7.45% in the same period last year, according to the General Statistics Office, or GSO. One reason for the dip is a swine flu outbreak that has hit the agricultural sector hard and could affect growth for the rest of the year. The outbreak has so far spread to 23 provinces and cities in Vietnam, where 82,000 pigs have already been killed to try to stem further infection. The UN's Food and Agricultural Organization has called on Vietnam to declare the outbreak a national emergency.
Art lovers flocked to the Hong Kong edition of the Art Basel Fair, featuring galleries from around the world as the city increasingly aspires to cement its place as one of the globe's leading arts hubs. Watch this.
As a layman, I think every year we have something very special and something very eye-catching. So that's why I come every year just to see, what's going on here and just to admire those art pieces.
Oh, it's very good. I mean, you get all sorts of, from very young artists to extremely established artists. So without going very far, and you don't have to put in a lot of effort, so you see a lot of work. So it's really good, I think. Yeah, there are a few here and there that I like. Most of them ones I like tend to be sold. Yeah, they sell them really quickly. But anyway, you go on the wait list for next time. I think it's definitely good for Hong Kong because it brings in a lot of people. I remember when I first started coming, it wasn't a lot of Americans, wasn't a lot of Europeans, but now there seems to be a lot more people from all over the globe. So, I think people really are coming because it's such a good quality art fair, and the galleries are very, very good galleries.
What I like about this is that
when I first came to Hong Kong, which was in the late 1978, 1980, there was so little art that you could get exposed to. And I try and get my students to come and get exposed to the art as well, because in the past it was quite parochial here. There was a very narrow range of art that people could see. So it's really good. I mean, you see parents bringing their kids to see the art, and it's nice. I'm never against anybody being exposed to more art anyway.
Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
Russian boxing chief Umar Kremlev has offered to settle the International Boxing Federation's $16 million debt if it is allowed to remain in charge at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. His unorthodox approach comes with the boxing's fate in next year's games hinging on the outcome of the International Olympic Committee's investigation into the scandal-ridden AIBA. Kremlev, in a letter to the IOC, said he was ready to close the debts of AIBA in full so long as our favorite sport remains on the Olympic program. The IOC has frozen boxing's preparations for Tokyo as it seeks proof that the AIBA has cleaned up its act sufficiently after allegations of bout fixing at the Rio Olympics in 2016. Its inquiry also covers AIBA governance and its anti-doping program. Relations between the AIBA and IOC soured further when Gafur Rakimov was elected its president in November. The controversial Uzbek businessman stood down last week, a move welcomed by Olympic rulers. Kremlev will use his personal money to wipe out AIBA's overdraft, a boxing federation of Russia told Inside Games. The IOC announced it will deliver its verdict on boxing's Tokyo fate on May 22nd. If the AIBA's Olympic suspension is maintained, the IOC has said it will step in to ensure the sport appears in Tokyo. The International Olympic Committee confirms that breakdancing will feature among the 4 new sports in competition at the 2024 Olympics. IOC President Thomas Bach says he admires the moves involved. In the NBA, James Harden scored 38 points to lead the Houston Rockets to a 112-85 victory over the Denver Nuggets in a battle of the NBA Western Conference contenders. Reigning NBA Most Valuable Player James Harden added 6 rebounds and 6 assists in 32 minutes on the floor as the Rockets blew past a Nuggets team boasting the second-best record in the West behind the reigning champion Golden State Warriors. Eric Gordon added 18 points and Austin Rivers chipped in 15 for the Rockets, who outscored the Nuggets 40-19 in the second quarter to seize control of the contest. Meanwhile, these are the results of the other games today in the NBA. And these are the stories for EN Sports. I'm Ben Bernaldez, and I'm 1 with 25.
Thank you, Ben. To mark the blossoming of Japan's famed cherry trees, Tokyo lights up gardens at night for visitors to take in the view. Take a look. Beautiful.
Yeah. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also, check out our boards on Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles, and we're 1 with 25.